The reference here, we're going to be in verse 49. Let's start in verse 49. It says, the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. So in Deuteronomy 28, God lays out these blessings and curses, right? Blessings if the Israelites obey, curses if they do not obey. And so this is part of the curses. And a lot of Hebrew Israelites reference this verse here in 49 because they're saying, hey, this is a symbolism for America, because, the symbol of America is the eagle, the bird. And so it's talking about how, America came over and enslaved these Hebrew Israelites and brought them over, to the Americas. And so, here's the thing. Here's my issue. Okay. Here's my issue, because maybe, right? Maybe. However, but historically, we know that the slave trade started in Europe, right? And so really the nations that we're talking about are European nations. We're talking about Portugal. We're talking about England. We're talking about France, right? These are the countries that we're really talking about that swooped over and came quickly. And so I don't personally believe this is a passage in reference to the United States. I just don't believe that, because historically we know that the institution of slavery started in Europe, and they came from Europe, and then they may have went to the Americas, right? But they started from Europe. That is historical fact. And so, for those that say, hey, this is referring to a particular nation, I think that's a stretch. You just don't know, okay? To be honest with you, it does not say what that nation is.
Yes, it does actually.
Picture, which we know is our lived reality. So when we come to the biblical spiritual system, we don't just lean upon it because it's the wisdom. We trust on it because what it's saying is true. What it's saying, we can confirm, because like the Bible says in Isaiah 43:11, when God speaks to the Israelites, he says, you are my witnesses. Out of every nation in the world, the Israelite people are the people that bear witness of the Most High God of the Hebrews. And it's not a voluntarily bearing witness. It's just because our lives are the most orchestrated by him, because he's literally told us the lives we will have to live if we disobey him.
I want to give all the praises and the honor to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Recha Hakwadash, and double honors to the elder apostles and the elder bishops of Great Millstone. Shalom also to you other elders, you brethren, you fellow believers and supporters of this truth, and shalom to the elect. Anyway, it seems a lot to go into in this video. Hope it can be edifying. We're going to go through a lot of, what do you call that? Wikipedia, I guess. Some of it's not 100% accurate, of course, right? But this video is inspired by this brother here. Well, no, that's not a brother. That's the video. This brother here, Yahacharab, the Hopeful Elect 4. And from what I saw in the videos, edifying video. We don't get to see them all, right? But this is where I got the inspiration to do the video, and I went to the actual channel of this guy, the martial artist, African martial artist or something like that. See, these guys want you to stay in Africanism, right? And we know the history before it was called Africa, right? And the Israelites that was dwelling in all these locations, across the various regions. So I'll read the scripture, and I got some Wikipedia, quite a few different things I got to look up. So let me read John 8:32. Okay, it says, we can quote this, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. So anyway, he was going into, he doesn't believe, this guy Adam Wilson brought out on a No Fugazi David Cooley podcast. So this is the thing that's going around now, saying that this has nothing to do with the transatlantic slave trade. I have no idea. Well, we do have an idea. Why would something of that magnitude, which wasn't technically just slavery, it was a torture and a punishment from the Heavenly Father, that you wouldn't even at least, now if those other people in the land went through something similar to that, they uphold theirs and say it's of God, even in that thing that they so-called go through. But when it come to us, it's not of God, right? So anyway, we were just some sub-Saharan Africans where the white man took us into slavery for no damn reason. or the reason of trade and goods. But all that hell we caught on them ships, and the fact that they took a book from us that we studied in a language that we knew and stripped that from us. But hopefully in the lesson we're going to prove the truth shall make you free. Right? So that's why I wanted to start off with that. And I want to read some Wikipedia. Now, what we want to go into is what he's talking about is starting with Europe, the slavery that was in Europe, and going into the Moors, because I did some extensive research. Well, not extensive, but I did some research on what other people thought, and because you need to know what other historians and people are saying, because we teach the Moors were so-called black, living in those regions, various parts of Europe in those regions, right? So what they try to say in these or online is that Moor means actually Muslim, right? This is what they say. But anyway, it says when the Moors ruled Europe, and it is a documentary presented by the English historian. It is a two-part series of the contribution that the Moors made in Europe during their 700-year reign in Spain and Portugal. So when you talk about the slave ships coming from Spain and Portugal, you had Israelites who were so-called black. You had Muslims who were so-called black, right? And what they was doing is making trades and deals, right, with other so-called black people. Okay? Then you got to understand, before the time of the transatlantic slave trade, the sub-Saharan trade, and the Barbary wars and the Barbary slave trade, those were still in the same coercion of so-called black Muslims and some black Israelites, right? So when you look at the time of the Moors, they were actually practicing, you remember the Israelites have always merged themselves to other religions. So this is why when you look at Africa now, is predominantly Islam, because the Barbary wars, Barbary trades, and Christianity because of the Christian wars. You know, if you follow me, that's how all that come about. And it really affected us as so-called black people. This is why you look at us, we make up mostly as black people Christians and this New Age Christianity, not the original Christianity. It make up Christianity and Islam. Anyway, it says Spain and Portugal ended in the 15th century. So this is where the slave ships came from. And they would take them back to Africa, and then they would take them over to the transatlantic slave trade. So those two things was coercing together. Let me see here. What does it say? I pulled up something. It says the slave trade in Europe was directly linked to the transatlantic slave trade, as European nations, primarily Portugal and Spain, and later Britain, actively participated in capturing and transporting enslaved Africans from Africa, coast of America, using triangular trade. And this came later. But before then, right, we were there. And we had a hand in it as well. Because remember, we ruled Europe. So I got a book called Black Kings of Europe. Now, in this book, it discussed about the textures of the hair. You remember we had other nations. Remember, I think, maybe I'll go into it, what happened in Sicily, right? So-called black blood through them, and some of the Italians, right? And obviously over the years, our hair texture changed, our complexion kind of changed, right? And they wanted to make it look more so-called white. So over the years, the pictures, would get messed up, or they might have some white cuttings in them or whatever, or they did it. And they would say over time, because it doesn't happen overnight, over time, right, they would repaint slowly. They would keep the images so-called black, but then they would keep the hair like long and stringy, right? And then ultimately lighten the pictures. They just kept lightening the pictures till they became white. And then they said it's because we needed to clean the pictures because they were dirty. right? Just what it is. Knowing that a fair complexion is someone with melanin, but they say fair complexion is white. The reason why you gotta hide from the sun and get skin cancer. So anyway, that's pretty much that on that. And and ultimately the images became white, right? And they said the images got dirty, but if they got dirty, why did the clothes still look all the same? Anyway, we on to you, It says in August 1203, the siege of Constantinople, Alexios was crowned co-emperor. However, in January 1204, he was disposed by a popular uprising, depriving the Crusaders of their promised bounty payments. Following the murder of Alexios on February 8, the Crusaders decided on the outright conquest of the city of April 1204, and they captured and plundered the anonymous wealth of the Crusaders' land. Let me get on to the point. The conquest of Constantinople was followed by the fragmentation of the Byzantine Empire into their state centers in the Nicaea and Epirus. Let me get to the point. Just find out where it says the Fourth Crusade is considered to have solidified the Eastern-Western schism of the Crusade, dealt with irrevocable blow to the Byzantine Empire. So we say that the Byzantine Empire was stretched from Eastern Rome to Western Asia, I believe. But this was us ruling that. So when we go to more, so we're going to try to go into a couple things and prove who the white man is and what happened as far as the Moors and so forth. So first we need to understand what Moor is. They say Moor means Muslim. This is what they say. It says right here, Moor, North African Berber, one of the race dwelling in Barbary. That's what I was just saying, the Barbary, right? And they would say they were Muslims, but you got to understand, we did convert to Islam. These were Israelites, right? And then it says from medieval Latin Moris, inhabited Mauritania, the region Algeria, from the Greek Moros, perhaps native name, or else cognate with Moros, black, right? So first of all, they have scattered our history, scattered our land, and they promoted nothing but lies. So now we got to go into all these sources and references, to find out certain things about who we are, right? And then you can see, going to the Russian icons, you can see the so-called black Christians, by the way, not white Christians. And you would see some of them had longer hair, they had dark skin, right? Some of them had curly, kinky hair. They were so-called Negroes, right? So it goes on to say, let me go here. It's a lot on this. I'm not going to read all of it. And it goes back to Spain and Portugal. There's many videos on that. But they constantly lie. And this is my point. I guess the point I'm trying to make is they're saying the Europeans were there and they were white, and that's their world, right? When you already had Japhetic people there, then we got there, right? And we had them in slavery, by the way. And in the 1400s, right here, it says, let me read this part. In 1224, the Muslims was expelled from Sicily to the settlement of Lucera, which was destroyed by the European Christians in 1300, right? The fall of Granada in 1492 marked the end of Muslim rule in Spain. And see how they keep saying Moors meant Muslim? Moor just meant black, right? And they were Israelites. So what they're not telling you is there was different nations of the same kind of complexion. We were just different people, But now all of a sudden all the Moors was just Muslim. And that was what we were speaking. We were speaking a bit of Islam, a bit of Hebrew. You go into Africa, especially during the time of the slave trade, they had multiple languages in Africa because of that. Because of the Barbary trade, because of the transatlantic slave trade, right? You had a multitude of languages, actually before the transatlantic slave trade. So let's go here. I typed a question. Did white people live in the Caucasus Mountains of Russia? It says, yes, people with European ancestry or Caucasians lived in the Caucasus Mountains. So this is not something we're just making up, which is part of Russia, right? The term Caucasian was first used by the German anthropologist Johann Friedrich Blumenbach in 1700s. Somewhere over here in the Wikipedia it talked about, which we all know from Georgia, Russia, right? Jews and Muslims in the Iberian Peninsula. So the Israelites were scattered, right? Here we go. Caucasus also exists in a distinct geographical space with the North Caucasus, the Greater Caucasus Mountain range from north, in the north is mostly shared by Russia and Georgia, right? That's why we say what we say. They're from the, and when you go back in the history of the time of Petra, right? I mean, I know this, but I typed it in so you can see. When it talks about Genesis 36 and 38, thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom. The reason why I'm bringing all this out, because they want to make it seem like when you're talking about the Barbary War, that Israel, white people went into slavery, all nations went into slavery. That's because we had them in slavery. That's all that was. And then we start selling out, and then ultimately we got sold to the transatlantic slave trade after our fall. That's pretty much what happened. But anyway, thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom. But the key in what this man was saying, the key is he was talking about we don't know what nation it is, as Andrew Wilson said. But Deuteronomy 28 and 15 said, if you will not hearken unto me, all these curses shall come upon you. This was strictly talking about Israelites. This wasn't talking about multitudes of nations. This is why your Barbary trade, this is why any other so-called slave trade had been going on even way before that in ancient times. So I have no idea what they think this slave trade we went through is not on a normal scale of other slave trades. It shouldn't even be called a slave trade, or it should be called a slave trade along with torture, murder, and pure humiliation, right? Pure destruction, right? So it says here, yes, Petra is considered to be very close to Mount Seir, right? Right? As Petra is located within the mountains of regions of Seir, Mount Seir. So we can see the history. This is why we call them what we call them. This is why we call them, they're living in the dwellings of the caves, the clefts of the rocks. Did you know there was the small hats? They literally said they escaped to New York, and this is why they built it that way, for a higher altitude, so to speak, or let me say a colder climate, to get away from the mosquitoes. They couldn't stand the mosquitoes because blood shows through the skin. I even had a small hat tell me that, this is why we get, we get skin cancer. Do you know the reason why we went over to the Vietnam War? They wanted our black asses over there because we had melanin. Them Vietnamese, which some of them are Israelites, but them Vietnamese, them heathens, they understood the garlic and the herbs in the jungle. But man, we was getting lit up with that malaria, and it wasn't really us; it was them. You see what I'm saying? So this is why when they went into Europe, let me see if I could find that. They went there, Right? Here it goes. It says, this statement, it says, mosquitoes, the statement is true. Mosquitoes typically don't prefer high altitudes because they thrive in warmer temperatures and stagnant water. This is why they would go into the clefts of the rocks. One of the reasons. I'm sure there was other reasons. But the Lord put them up there in the clefts of the rocks. So we see that the same way they got to Europe, right? And they did what they did in, here we go, the history of the Caucasus region. It goes in all of this throughout history. Southern Caucasus as parts of North Caucasus have come under the control of various empires. It's a lot of history. I'm not going to read all this, but it goes in the history of the Caucasus. Maybe that's why they call that during the election the Caucasus. I don't know. It sounds familiar. Jeremiah 49:16. It says, the terribleness have deceived thee, and the pride of thine heart, O thou that dwelleth in the clefts of the rocks, right, and holdest the height of the hill, though he should have make thy nest as high as an eagle, I will bring thee down, then saith the Lord. This is what was quoted in the book of Obadiah. Obadiah 1 or Obadiah 2. Though thou dwellest in the cleft of the rocks, I will bring thee down. This is the same thing that was said there, right? So we see by process of elimination who these people were. So these people went pushed up into the mountains, and you had Israelites living in that region. We dispersed everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Ezekiel 35:16. As thou didst rejoice the inheritance of the house of Israel, because it was desolate, so will I do unto thee. Thou shalt be desolate, O Mount Seir, and all Idumea. See, that tells you right there, it's not individual. You can't be, I believe in Jesus now and I'm going to be saved. The Lord never changed. He never sent his son to change. Right? He said, I'm coming to do the will of my Father. Even all of it, and they shall know that I am the Lord. Right. So this goes back to Malachi when he says, Jacob have I loved, but Esau I've hated. So this is their characteristics, is living in the mountains. They're in the mountains in Russia, Georgia. They're in the mountains of Edom and Mount of Petra, Edom, right, near Jordan, and then they're in the mountains of Georgia, Russia. Then they came here, and every city, from a bird's eye view, looks like clefts of the rock. So no, this proves that they were in some form of servitude under the Israelites, but then they wind up doing the transatlantic slave trade when we lost power, right? And we went down, and they came up, as Romans, I think Revelation 20 say, they was in the bottomless pit, and they were raised up, and then they came up, and then came, with those deals, them small hats. They made a lot of deals. Look that word up in the online etymology. It means extortioner. And they made all these deals, and it was just business. It's just when the white man got us, he had a heavy, heavy spirit on him for hatred towards us, because that was the natural hate of Jacob and Esau, going back to the beginning in Genesis 25. Anyway, you can just read on this.